All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martial Arts. My name is Austin Shaper. This is a show where we cover the topics of UAP, UFC, and World War III. This is going to be another UAP episode. I know we've been cranking out a lot of the UAP ones recently, but it's only because there's just so much news going on. And this week is a little slow on UFC, and World War III is just kind of happening eventually. We don't know when, and sometimes there's breaking news, sometimes there's not. But the UAP phenomenon right now, there's just so much to cover. It is Tuesday morning right now, I think right before 10 o'clock. I am so exhausted. It is crazy. I've had so much going on recently with work and just life in general. So I'm running on about one cylinder this morning, and that cylinder is misfiring. So today's episode, it could be jumbled. I would do my best to be clear and concise because I have a lot to do today, but there's just so much to talk about in the UAP domain. And hopefully you guys have been keeping up with this news. As I've mentioned time and time again, not only am I not to be looked at as an authority or somebody who knows it all, or where you should take what I say and, write a check with it, try to cash it at the bank. A lot of these things are just my speculation, in my opinion, but I'm not really here to break news. So I hope that you guys do the due diligence, if you're interested in this subject, to go out and kind of find some trusted reporters and, journalists that you can keep in touch with to get some of the latest updates. And then, I hope that people come to me as like a secondary source when they want to speculate and kind of hash out ideas and talk about some of the news that's breaking. But maybe don't look to me as the guy who's going to break the news, but perhaps you're here anyway. So if you're here, welcome. A couple housekeeping notes before we get started. Do me a favor and click like and subscribe on the YouTube video. That would be very helpful for me. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, just click follow, leave a 5-star review. That would be awesome. And then lastly, if you enjoy talking about any of these three topics, or perhaps two of the three, or maybe even all three of them, go ahead and go to the description in this video and click the Discord link at Mixed Martial Arts. Join our Discord, and I'm trying to build a little community of people who just like to talk about these ideas, ask questions, bring up breaking news, and just kind of hash out these ideas and all the nuances in these topics. And yeah, just a community of like-minded people. So I think that'd be really cool to be able to grow that so that this isn't just a one-way monologue from me every week, but we can also be having, a bit of a conversation. That's what gets me interested, is to hear other people's opinion, not just my own. So go ahead and hit follow on that and join us. And so far, it's not many people in it. I think only maybe 9 or 10, and it's a lot of me just posting Twitter things. But it'll grow over time, so go ahead and check that out. Okay, diving into today, we've got so much going on, and where do we even start? Let's start with this hearing that's going to happen on the 26th. This just got announced a couple of days ago, and I can't remember off the top of my head if this is in Congress. I know congressmen will be attending, but I don't know if they call it the Senate committee. I don't know. There's a lot of terminology that kind of goes over my head, but suffice it to say there is going to be a hearing, and the public will be able to view this hearing on July the 26th. They have not given us a time yet, and we don't know. We know for a fact we're going to be hearing from witnesses. We just don't know what witnesses. We've seen a lot of speculation that perhaps Lou Elizondo, a few pilots, and David Grush from the News Nation interview, the recent whistleblower, supposedly he's going to be there. That would be who I would be the most excited to hear from. We've heard from Lou Elizondo for literally years, ever since the 2017 New York Times article. We've been hearing from him. David Grush, I think, is the one who has the most credible testimony as of recent times that would be the most beneficial for the public to hear, but they have not announced it yet. We do know that the bipartisan nature of this how this hearing has come together and this new legislation that's passing, it's very odd. The timing is odd. And the nature in which it's been developed, whenever there's a bipartisan agreement, it never really works out well for the public, does it? It's always something bad for the budget or the raising the debt ceiling or taking us to a war or something. Whenever the Republicans and Democrats agree on something, it doesn't typically bode well because it's something like the powers that be are kind of like, hey, you guys got to be in lockstep on this, so get it together, stop with the play fighting, and we're all going to be on this path together. So weirdly enough, the combination of these hearings that are coming and this new legislation passing, let me just read a little excerpt of some of this legislation because it's crazy, and you really need to take a moment. If you're watching this video and you're skeptical on this phenomenon, the UAP thing, even being real, maybe you think it's all fake or it's people aren't seeing what they think they're seeing, whatever it may be, you need to take a break real quick and just listen to this, because this is not conspiracy talk. This is not an opinion. This is not some crazy dude on the internet. Well, maybe you listen to a crazy dude on the internet now, but this legislation being passed is not. This is coming from the government. This is coming from leaders of the Senate. This is coming from Congress. And as you can read in this article that I'm about to go over briefly, this is being organized through the White House and other members of the government. So basically what I'm getting at is this is insane. This is out in all the years of people following these topics and the slow leaks over time. All of a sudden we're getting blasted like every 24 hours with just mind-blowing information. So let's just go over a little bit of this. This comes from Tiny Claus on Twitter. He says the new UFO amendment gives the government eminent domain over exotic materials and biological evidence of non-human intelligence. I believe the new legislation, Ross Coulthart mentioned that the phrase non-human intelligence is mentioned 26 times. 26 times it says non-human intelligence. So right off the bat, if there's nothing to this, this is all fake, how on earth does it make sense that these people who are in the tops of government are writing this stuff like it's coming from a fantasy book and they're trying to put it into legislation? It doesn't add up. We have seen multiple congressmen now, come out and say they've seen evidence and they know that there's a cover-up going on. You got to go check out what Tim Burchett's was saying, what Marco Rubio said, Matt Gaetz, who else? Chuck Schumer's obviously the one organizing this new legislation. So all these guys are coming out and saying they know there's a reality to this. They believe that the answers to this phenomenon are being hidden from congressional oversight, and that pisses them off. They got egos. They like to know all the secrets, and it's a separate issue if the public is ever going to get read into this at the level we want. But Congress seems very greedy. As I mentioned last week, it's like they're a dog with a bone right now and they don't want to let go. For whatever reason, they feel slighted. Well, it's not for whatever reason. It's for a very specific reason. They feel slighted that they have been kept out of the loop on this subject. And so now they're doing everything in their power, and perhaps it's for political points. I don't really care the reason. I assume that any politician is just doing things for their own popularity or financial gain. It's a safe assumption. But at the same time, if it benefits humanity and society as a whole, let them play their games. We just want answers. But so as I mentioned, it says biological evidence of non-human intelligence, and this is an important part. The gives the government eminent domain over exotic materials. This relates to the entire narrative that a lot of these craft and perhaps bodies and technology as a whole has been given over to the private sector over the years, so as to been kept out of, government oversight. And the government seems to be pretty keen to that, and they realize that they need to put specific wording in this legislation that states that you're going to have to give this shit over, and now it's the government's property. I don't know if that's fair. I've heard Ross Coulthart kind of argue this out. Is it fair that these companies, if they were given, say, a craft in the 1960s and they've been working on it and there was no paperwork signed, no contract signed, do they really have to give it over to the government? I don't know. Ross even mentions, you guys probably saw this, that he knows specifically of a giant craft that's so big that it's not going to be able to be moved because, as you guys have probably seen, there's been videos of people talking about this, and this was an issue I was skeptical of. When this legislation was announced, everyone's first thought was like, okay, it gives them what? I think it was like 60 days, and then they have to turn it over within 6 months. Okay, they're going to move the damn craft and bodies. They're just going to move them, and by the time your slow ass gets there, it's going to be gone. Ross says, in contrary to popular belief, Ross says that there's some craft that he knows of that are so big that there's no way they can even move it. One in particular that was built outside of the United States, there was a building built around this craft outside of the United States in some undisclosed location. Ross says he cannot give up his sources, but I believe him. And he says that it's a giant black triangular craft, and it's so fucking big, there's no way they're going to be able to move it. So, interesting, because if the Congress or whoever it is that's going to be leading this charge gets a hold of even one of these things, say one body, one craft, one piece of a craft, it's game on. So that gives us that gives us some optimism. It gives me some optimism to know that maybe there's some objects they're not going to be able to just hide in a new bunker. And, giving these contractors, these corporations, these companies such as Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, et cetera, giving them amnesty before they come looking for your craft and things you've hid, I think it's a good idea because I think we always hear people talk about who's going to be criminally charged, who's going to be liable. I hate to break the news to you guys. I don't think anybody's going to be held criminally liable. We haven't even heard the JFK news still. They have still not released the JFK files in their entirety. So if you think they're going to start, handing people over who have been secretively working on these projects for a long time, I think you got another thing coming. Who knows? Don't quote me on that. It's possible. But let's see what Matthew Pine says about this legislation on Twitter. He says, at this point, it should be clear that the executive and legislative branches of the United States government on a bipartisan basis, important, are treating the UAP disclosure as an issue of the highest national significance. It is incumbent on national leadership to address it directly and prepare the public. I mean, let's just read some more. It quote says in the legislation, non-human intelligence. The term non-human intelligence means any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomenon or of which the federal government has become aware. In general, the term unidentified anomalous phenomenon means any object operating or judged capable of operating in outer space, the atmosphere, ocean surfaces, or undersea. I mean, like I said, the wording in this, it's like these guys did their homework for once. I mean, just rewind it when we had that hearing that was open to the public with Aero, and I thought it was an absolute sham of a hearing, and I found it to be so embarrassing that the congressmen were asking Aero some very specific questions. They asked them, have we seen these craft underwater? Do we have evidence of these craft underwater? And Aero says, we'll talk about that in a closed-door session. They asked him about the Maelstrom Air Force Base incident where the nukes were turned off. We don't really know about that. That's just hearsay. We haven't investigated that. And this is supposedly the organization that is meant to, investigate these things. So the last one was an absolute sham, but now you see the wording is very specific in this bill. Extremely specific. So it says, or undersea lacking prosaic attribution due to performance characteristics and property not previously known to be achievable based upon commonly accepted physical principles, such as instantaneous acceleration, absent apparent inertia, hypersonic velocity, transmedium travel, positive lift, multispectral signature control. They're very, very specific. They did their homework. Here's an article that talks about it. It says, this has led to some in Congress to believe that the executive branch was concealing important information regarding UAPs over broad periods of time. So as I said, these guys are curious now. They feel that they've been lied to, which they have. And now they can score a lot of political brownie points, justifiably so, if they lead the charge in this. And it seems that for whatever reason, there's a wave coming. I don't know what the reason is. I see a lot of people arguing about this back and forth. We don't know why all of a sudden the government wants to squeal piggy. We don't know. There's lots of speculation. Further point this article makes, it says the federal government shall have eminent domain over any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non-human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities. So they've covered their bases on this one. And we don't know why. We don't know why the politicians are kind of all working together on this. But as I mentioned, I think it's a good rule of thumb that when you see bipartisan activity, be skeptical because it means someone's telling them to agree on this and to stop with the nonsense. So whether this is for political brownie points or whether they're just getting ahead of a wave because they've been told there's a plan for some sort of disclosure, I don't know, but I think we're seeing a change in tune very creepily fast. We've gotten practically nothing but slow leaks over the course of 70 years? And now all of a sudden, within 1 month, they all want to be on Team UFO. They all think this is an issue that must be addressed with the utmost concern, which we've all known this for 1,000 fucking years. They're the ones who are late to the party. And the question is, why are they all in lockstep? That is what makes me skeptical and it makes me concerned. And I was going to talk about this at the end, but I think we should jump into it right now. This comes from Ross Coulthart's podcast, Need to Know, with Bryce Zabel. And Ross, as you know, he's the one who broke the story with David Grush. He's a very credentialed journalist. I would recommend you always keep up with his news because the dude's got some great sources. But Bryce Zabel in the last podcast mentioned, he says he'd suggest that the reason that the UFO disclosure is being rushed is that there's some bad news involved in this, and that Chuck Schumer, what's his name, Senate House Majority Leader, whatever, must have a fire behind his back. Colt Hart says, I've got a pretty clear idea of what the government knows. There is a constraint of time. That leads us to question, what is this constraint that is causing them to spaz out and all of a sudden be on Team UFO? I've seen some people say the reason is simply that they can't keep this secret for much longer due to the whistleblowers, due to social media, due to the internet, due to all these different things that are changing the way that they can keep secrets. I think it's possible, but I also think that this is a secret that's been kept for so long, and so much has been done, everything from murders to all kinds of cover-up and lies and deceit, to be able to keep this under the rug, that I don't know if they would just give it up like that. Like, oh, it's too difficult now, we might as well just come clean. I don't see that. It is ultimately a possibility, but a lot of people, like I said, there's a lot of contention about this right now. Why is the government doing this? Why are they writing non-human intelligence? I mean, no one's making fun of them. It's not a joke. No one's laughing anymore. I mean, it's really being addressed. And I've always thought that when we do get some sort of disclosure, and I should mention, I don't think I screenshotted this, but one of the amendments to this proposed legislation specifically says the UAP Public Disclosure Act of 2023, and it talks about having a staged public disclosure. That's in the bill. So, dude, take a moment and just think about this. Non-human intelligence, non-Earth materials, extraterrestrial life, public disclosure, UAP 2020. This is all in writing in the government. So, and we're about to, on the 26th, get a hearing. As I've said in the last episode, is that hearing going to tell us everything we want to know? Is it going to be probably a video of aliens? No, I don't think it's going to be any of that, but I think that there's an obvious push. There's an obvious push from the government right now to get ahead of this, and I would have to agree with Bryce and Ross, who say that there's some reason that's lit a fire under their asses that's making them act this way. Bryce Zabel believes it's not good news. I think that's probably true because they've been following this certain plan, this strategy of denial, deflection, and, just following this plan of making light of this issue for so long, and now all of a sudden it's changing so fast. I don't think that's for a good reason. I do not think for a moment that it's because the government wants to be forthright, or even that they're being pressured by the public. If they're being pressured by anybody, the speculation could be that it's this non-human intelligence. Maybe gave them some certain amount of time to break the news to us, or perhaps they have some agenda of their own, and we will be interrupting that agenda by us not being aware of their presence. There's so many ways to deduce what this could be, but as I said, people aren't in agreement on this. Sean5150 on Twitter says nobody's going to get anything of value. He's speaking about these hearings. If Clinton himself and his Joint Chiefs of Staff couldn't get these records, and trust me, they tried like hell, what makes you think anyone else will? They are private corporations. Outside their oversight, it ain't going to happen. The Clinton stuff was so long ago, so I don't know if you can just say the past equals the future on this one. That was so long ago, and as we just talked about, there's clearly some sort of change in the momentum, and we can only argue as to what that reason is. We can only speculate, but there is you have to be pretty foolish to not see that there's a change in the wording and there's a change in the attitude from the government. They're not talking light about it anymore. They're acting like it's a big deal, and that's good. It is a big deal. Anon Study 83 says, I just hope the typical overclassification reasoning that everything is national security related and should be redacted doesn't come back to bite again. This is still happening with certain JFK documents. Illegal activities that make the country look bad is not national security. Yeah, this is a tricky one because while I do agree with you fully, and I'm still pissed that they haven't released the JFK things. I mean, the old defense of it would reveal sources and methods is an absolute fucking joke because all your sources and methods are fucking dead from the JFK incident. That they're dead. So you're not defending anybody. You're hiding your own secrecy. And I hope I didn't get banned from YouTube for saying that, but I think it's the case. But he is not optimistic. This guy on Twitter, Study83, he says that, it's going to be overclassification. And I think that this treads on a very tight rope because this is related to national security. As much as I hate hearing that answer, it is related to national security. It is because, the technology can be weaponized. Perhaps these entities, these beings don't really mean us well. Perhaps the technology could fall into the hands of our adversaries in Russia or China. There's so many variations as to why this actually does matter for national security. Simply the public could revolt and just lose their minds depending on the reality of the phenomenon, and what we're told or what we find out could cause a societal upheaval, and that is a national security interest. So I hate that answer too. I fucking hate that answer because I don't think it's fair. And at the end of the day, I believe we deserve to know the truth, even if the truth isn't pretty. I think they have no right to keep something like this from us, no right at all. But to their mild defense, it is true that this information could change the world as we know it and could change society, and that is a risky endeavor to embark on. Telling the public something of this gravity, it is scary. And once you tell us one thing, as we mentioned in last week's episode, you tell us one thing, you're not going to be able to stop at that. You're not going to be able to say, like, oh, we found a craft, but we can't tell you about the technology. We're not going to tell you about the beings or why they're here. It's not going to happen. You say one thing, you admit one little detail of this being factual in a major public government way, like the president coming out in a briefing or something like that. The public's never going to give up until they get answers. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. So I understand the dilemma they might be in, and that's without us even knowing all the cards. We only got half a deck here, and we're trying to make decisions and conclusions off of it. They may not even know much about these entities. I find that hard to believe since they've been around for so long, but they might not know much, and it may be scary for them to allow the public in on something that they don't feel competent with, So it's an interesting scenario. Sean Burke on Twitter says, I have a feeling Congress is playing right back into the hands of the deep state. This is a trap year again for another 100 years. It's all about wording. I don't know. I think you're kind of getting into conspiracy land there. But to your point, it does seem that there's some sort of entity or force that is encouraging this to happen. And typically, as I mentioned, when these things get bipartisan agreement, it doesn't bode well for the American people. So to your point, I don't think it's the deep state. I think that it's more likely that, either the government's being pressured by these entities or by some sort of clock that's ticking against them, and we don't know what it is. I think the least likely reason is that they just are like, oh, the public's too savvy now. We can't hide it from them anymore. They're getting very annoying. We better tell them. I think that's the least likely reason, but it is possible. I think it's more likely that there's something happening behind the scenes of a grave importance that is forcing them. They're coming into the light kicking and screaming, is my opinion. I don't think this is something they want to do. I don't think this is something they like to do. I don't think they give a damn about helping the public out and making us aware. I think that they're being forced by some other force outside of their control. And one thing I think we can rest assured on is whatever disclosure we are going to get, whether it is 2023 or not, it's coming soon. And I don't think it'll be forthright. I don't think it'll be truthful. I think, if anything, it'll be a very small piece of the puzzle, and perhaps it'll be very weaponized, and it'll be construed into something to give the government more power, more money, more control, the usual recipe. So you can bet that when the government does tell us about this, they will weaponize it to the best of their ability. That is in their nature, and that's just the way things go. William James says this is absolutely brilliant. I agree. The wording in this legislation is very specific. And, it's clearly Congress and the Senate know more than we know because they did their homework. They're not acting like they have in the past, where they're like making fun of the subject and they act like they don't know anything about the specifics. If you were to say, oh, what about craft underwater? They would giggle at you. Now they know that this is in the hands of private entities. They're wording that. They're wording everything about non-human intelligence. They know what they're doing. That's my point. I don't know if they're being briefed on this. Someone's telling them this. But several members of Congress have come out, Tim Burchett leading the charge and admitting that he has seen the evidence and that he believes this is technology humanity can't handle, but that the public deserves to know. Sat King 916 says, I just read it, talking about the legislation. He says disclosure is coming. I think it's coming, man. I think this is crazy, dude. Just take a minute, sit back and think, why on earth are you reading non-human intelligence? Even that sentence alone, or that phrase alone, is crazy, because if there's nothing to it, if this is all for nothing, then they wouldn't be going through all this effort. They wouldn't be giving interviews to the news talking about this and saying that they've seen the evidence, that they've been briefed on this, and that there's much more to it than the public knows, and that the public deserves answers. None of this would be happening if there was nothing to it. So there is something to it. The phenomenon is real, and I will never get tired of saying that. The phenomenon is real. What does the government know? Do they know everything? Do they know a fraction of it? We're going to get answers soon. I don't think the 26th is the big revelation day, but I do think with the passing of this legislation and the combination of these government whistleblowers, I think the combination of these things in tandem is leading to a forced disclosure from the government that will give us some sort of answers. Will those answers be the full truth? I really fucking doubt it, man. Like I said, we still haven't gotten to the bottom of the JFK stuff. So if you think they're going to squeal piggy in its entirety on the UFOs, I think you're a little too optimistic. Hello, goodbye on Twitter says, I'm beginning to think everything going on is related to this, the upheaval in society, that knowing this and the technology itself will be extremely disruptive. So why not do a little disruption beforehand to prepare the population? Yeah, I think he's kind of relating to saying like the everything going on in the world right now could be related to this issue in terms of the possibility of us going to war with Russia, and the Russia-Ukraine thing, and the in the economy going crazy, in the presidential election. This could all be related, and that's what makes studying geopolitics so fascinating when you're also interested in the UAP phenomenon, is that it kind of rewrites history. You can look back in time and be like, wow, I wonder if the Cuban Missile Crisis was what we thought it was, or if there was more to this. And to go off on a side point, this has always been why I've kind of speculated the reason why maybe we haven't ever gone to nuclear war is perhaps these entities are forbidding us from doing it. Perhaps the governments don't have the power we think they do. Perhaps if we were to use those nukes, these extraterrestrials would stop them in their tracks, of which they've done multiple times. There's reports like Maelstrom Air Force Base where they floated right over, turned our nukes on, turned them off. Happened in Russia. They've shot down test missiles before. All kinds of things have happened that lead me to believe that they don't want us to use nuclear weapons, and that if we did, they would put a halt to it. So it changes the geopolitical chess game when you look at it in that way, because right now it could paint a different picture as to why NATO is so willing to go to a potential war with Russia, because maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe they know that Russia can't use their nukes, because they're sure acting in a way that makes you believe they're not concerned about a nuclear war. I think that that's fair to say. But that's another topic for another day, I suppose. My point is just that this the reality of this phenomenon rewrites a lot of what we know about politics and geopolitics as a whole and history. So fascinating times. James657 on Twitter says this is nothing we don't already know. Maybe, yeah, I guess. But at the end of the day, all that we know is based on kind of hearsay. Whereas if we get actual evidence, actual heads of government coming out on TV and telling this to the masses, it's not necessarily maybe different information, but the gravity of that information is going to hit home with people who have never really studied this topic, like you or me watching these videos on YouTube and keeping up with this phenomenon. So while it might not be different information, the same information hitting in a much more important way, it can't be overstated how important this is. Like, it really can't. It's just crazy times, man. I don't know what to make of this. I'm going to be covering the hearing on the 26th. As I mentioned, I wouldn't freak out just yet and think that we're going to get all the answers or some video of an alien. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I do think that this is a step in the right direction. And ultimately, this is kind of scary. I got to say, it's kind of scary, because while I do want answers, and while anybody who studies this subject does want answers, it's rather unsettling to see the nature and how this is unfolding right now, whereas decades and decades have gone by and we've got nothing but slow leak after rumor after speculation, and now and the government was always making light of it. And now, for whatever reason, you've got the hearings coming, you've got the whistleblowers from the highest level of the government coming out, you've got bipartisan agreement on this. You've got specific worded legislation coming out on this. I mean, you have a culmination of a lot of crazy things all coming to head, and where it's going to lead, I couldn't tell you, but I'm here for it. I recommend you guys watch the hearing. We're going to be able to find out. If I can, I'll post details on the time and where you can watch it. I'm sure someone's going to be broadcasting it on YouTube, guys, but I don't know, dude. So crazy, so fucking crazy that our own government, you're seeing the Senate and the Congress come out and say things like there's a non-human intelligence. We need the evidence. We need the non-human materials. We know that the private sector, such as Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, etc., are keeping these things, and we're giving them X amount of months to turn it over. The government now has eminent domain of this. I mean, what else can you say other than we are living in the absolute fucking craziest time, dude? I mean, even if you took the aliens and the UFOs out of the subject, we're living in a crazy time historically as far as the world and the economy and geopolitics. But you add in this phenomenon, and I do think you have a recipe for potentially disaster. You got a recipe for people losing their shit. And I think the government is being dragged into the light on this, but I also think they're going to weaponize it. And I think that they know something very dangerous, and that something is inspiring them now in 2023 to take action on this. I don't know what that is, man. I can only sit here in my mind and think. What is it? Any reason I come up with doesn't really seem like a good one. I think there's people who are part of these legacy programs who do want the truth and do have that genuine intent that they want to come out to the public. But I think that can only be looked at on an individual basis with people such as David Grush, who are patriots, and they've been working alongside the people who are involved in this program. And they say, enough's enough. The public deserves to know. But I think from an organization level, in perspective, there's only nefarious reasons why they want to tell us, or scary reasons. They're not the top of the food chain, and they're getting pressured from this non-human intelligence that they have to come forward, or perhaps this non-human intelligence is going to take matters into their own hands. And I think it's fair to say we're probably like bugs to them. It's clear they're not malevolent in the terms of their want to just smite us. Because if they did, why wouldn't they? If they did want that, why would they have not already done that? But it's possible we're like bugs to them, and if we get in their way, they'll squish us. And if we stay out of their way, they just kind of go about their business, doing whatever it is with this planet, this solar system they desire. And perhaps the government is kind of impeding whatever it is they want to do. And I would love for you guys to comment, give me your thoughts on this, because there's endless speculation on it. But I'm just here to tell you guys, buckle up, man. Buckle up, because something's coming down the pipe, and whether it's the truth or whether it's more lies, it has the potential to change society and to change the world as we know it. And I think if you can look at this legislation and see specific wording such as UAP Public Disclosure 2023, take a deep breath and realize something's coming down the pipe very soon. I think this year, perhaps at the latest, the beginning of next year. Something's coming. You can't really do anything to get ready for it, but be open-minded and be ready to have your paradigm shattered. I think that's what it is. Be ready to have your paradigm shattered, and also be ready to not believe whatever it is the government tells you, because the government's going to tell us something. Is that something going to be the truth? I don't think so. Is it going to be a fraction of the truth? Potentially. Is it going to be weaponized? Almost certainly. That is the government's playbook. It always has been. And it only scares me that for some reason they've got a fire under their asses to tell us. It only scares me. I've got no faith that they want us, from the organizational standpoint, that the entire government wants us to know about this. Individuals do. The government doesn't. And if they're telling us, somebody's making them tell us, or some sort of outside circumstance beyond our control is forcing their hand. Crazy times, guys. Once again, please, if you enjoyed the show, go ahead, click like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. And lastly, if you'd like to be a part of the community, talk back and forth with me and others about the UAP phenomenon, UFC, and World War III news, go ahead and click the description of the video and click the Discord, Mixed Martial Arts, join it, and we can talk and hash these ideas out. Love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I got to get back to my life because I have a lot to do today, but I was really excited to come out and just kind of update you guys if you were behind on some of this news. So we will see July 26th, guys. Buckle up. We'll see you soon. Peace out.